So a child comes into the world, it doesn't come in minus a kidney, it doesn't come in minus a nervous system, it doesn't come in minus a brain, it comes in whole, and the way that we respond to each one of those things is developing it. So it's like we have to pay attention to all the needs. Some families will have a lot more work to do around safety and security because they've been in domestic violence or they've had their house burnt down. Then the child may need more attention in that need.
Welcome, Quanta folks, to another episode of our little sister podcast, Alchemising Education, little sister to Faark the Shoulds, which very much underpins these conversations. I'm Jodi from QuantiMama.
Hello everyone, and I'm Kerri from QuantiMama. Thank you for being with us again.
And Kez, take it away. You've got a guest favourite today, which is very exciting.
Yeah, I have got a guest favourite today because this beautiful woman that I'm going to introduce, Dr. Maxine Therese, is someone who I've known for many years now and has certainly supported my family. So welcome, Dr. Maxine.
Thank you, Kerri. Thanks for having me, and thank you, Jodi. I'm excited to be here.
Yeah, great. So let me just tell you a little bit about Maxine, is that we first went to her many years ago when it came to wanting support for us as parents and with our children, as many of us are looking for support. And not only did she help me better understand the needs of my kids, but the little surprise in the work that she does is that she also supported me in going back and I guess really looking at my own inner child. Ooh, that was powerful, and that was a really pleasant surprise, one that carries with me today in terms of everything that I do. And, you know, as we know, that there's always more, things that we can learn about and explore. So Maxine's work really helps parents look beyond the behaviour. So that's something I think is really critical, is just not looking at what's happening for them in that moment, but looking at what might be going on underneath the actual behaviour itself. And for those who are struggling, or whose kids are struggling, and you're kind of wondering, what are you doing? Are they misbehaving? Well, Maxine would say they're not misbehaving, that they're simply communicating an unmet foundational need. Through her research, which has been going on for 25 years, research, writings and practice, she invites us to rethink what children really need to feel safe, supported, connected and well, especially in a world where they're often asked to fit systems that were not designed around their needs. And so recently Maxine wrote a beautiful article on her Substack that was titled, "The School System Wasn't Built for Your Child." And that really captured our attention, because obviously that's something that we speak a lot about, and we want to try and delve into that and just explore that a little bit further today. So if I can just give a little bit of an intro to the article. You begin the article, Maxine, by outlining the history of schooling was designed for society. Wow. So it's aimed to produce a certain kind of citizen, a worker, or an adult that is compliant, which is really bold in saying that. That resonated for us.
It's a big statement.
It's a big statement. And so I guess what I wanted to ask you was, what prompted you to write this article? Where did that question around, was school ever designed for the children, where did it come from, and why do families need to know about this now?
Yeah, beautiful. Thank you. I sort of interrupted there by saying it's actually a truth statement, and it might seem bold, but it's actually the reality of the structures that have been designed to support families and children. It's been about raising a citizen or raising a person so that they are compliant, that they're workable, that they can work within structures, that they're not going to be too resistant, that they're going to actually know how to be disciplined if the powers that be want that. Now, when I talk about the powers that be, it might feel like it's a little bit heavy or bold or harsh, but it's actually something that's been inherent in the way that we meet children historically. So a lot of philosophy really helps us to understand, and my background is psychology and philosophy, but I really love learning about the philosophical underpinnings of how do we build a society, how have they been built in the past, and what is a society, or what is it to be a human being. And it's really interesting, when I first was studying, realising that children have really been expected to be not just little adults, but never really seen for the potential that they have, because as far back as Aristotle, there was a belief that children weren't ready for anything.
Yes.
And they had to be taught by adults who often, as you said in the introduction, Kerri, don't realise, and we didn't have a model or map to help us understand this, but adults are little children a lot of the time too, but not in the most positive sense. So we all carry our own childhood history in our bodies.
Yeah.
And as we grow and move through life and have different experiences, we project our unmet needs on children. So it's almost like if I had a disadvantaged childhood, then I'm going to make sure that the children around me aren't disadvantaged, or I won't notice their disadvantage because I'm used to it. So it's like looking from our own perspective as adults, but unfortunately we've grown historically for hundreds of years with the idea that children don't know anything. That's my work with Childosophy, is that it's the child's wisdom. So what is the child's wisdom? And if we build things that we expect our children to fit into, then we're missing a whole lot, which is really the premise of all of my work.
So what is it that the school system, obviously it is built for efficiency, and it's built to
certain outcome.
to a certain outcome and to measure in a certain way. What is it that the school system, do you think, is lacking or missing the mark on when it comes to the needs of the children?
Yeah, I think any system's really a reflection of our current state of consciousness. Like we move and grow through the world, we sort of see things from a different perspective. Like if we have a limited worldview, i.e., children are not useful in certain ways until they get to a certain age, or they're useful at certain ages because they can do things, or I'm thinking, I've got the image of the children in the coal mine, know, because little are they could actually do things that adults couldn't do. But generally, school systems are built on the Aristotelian idea, or Aristotle really sort of started that. There's always been schools of some sort throughout history, you'll find it, but the way we taught children and worked with children and learned from children was different in tribal cultures. It's really the rise of industrialism that we see this change in schooling, which is where we believed that we had to get children early. It's the Jesuit idea, show me the child at 7 and I'll show you the man. So there was this cultural and a level of consciousness that said that we're doing the right thing by children if we can mould them early. Let's get them and let's mould them. So we'll show them how to do. We'll force them, if they're left-handed, to write right-handed. We'll teach them, get them to sit, and we'll teach them the maths that they need for upper grades or whatever. And a lot of that system just does not pay attention to the child. They're paying attention to the means and the method that we want the child to become, or for a job or a particular type of society. Workers, really, in the industrial era, it was like, we need to train factory workers. So we need to start them young, sit them at desks, teach them if they're not doing what we want, that they'll get punished. So many things that we look back on and we think it's just barbaric, really.
Go on, sorry.
No, that's okay. I was going to say our school system is really just an extension. It hasn't changed a lot, not really.
It does feel, I totally agree with everything you're saying there. And I mean, I think sometimes what happens for us is we come from a perspective of the real-time experience of watching our kids unpack that programming.
Oh, definitely.
And so that's, I think, where our insights come from, but they echo what you're saying. And what I find interesting that you were mentioning in that article, which I think will be so accessible to so many parents, because they can feel this itch, like they can feel it in their cells that something's NQR, but they can't quite work out what that is, mainly because we've all been indoctrinated into that being the, the benchmark for how you raise a human being is to get them into school early. And so I'm curious about why now do you think is the whole thing coming apart? Because as you say, it's been going on for hundreds of years, and although there's been probably a gentle, underlying dissonance around that, and there've been a few breakout examples and so forth, for the most part, the populace has gone along with, the belief that it's the, best practice. But obviously, as you're saying, there's so much evidence that, in fact, this stuff is actually causing harm. It's showing up in mental health stuff, and we have unprecedented numbers of mental health within our young people, which once you recognise it, it should be the most offensive thing around, really. Absolutely. That there is harm going on. Why are we coming to this space now where going forward in this sort of blind trust becomes untenable?
I think that it's part of a bigger picture, Jodi. I sort of see our unfolding as evolution in a way. So, throughout times, everybody comes into the world already equipped for its perfect self-development, but it's mostly based on what's gone before. So this is the epigenetic side of who we are as human beings. But there's something happening, and especially in the last 100 years, maybe in the last 10 years, we could say maybe since COVID, pardon me, where people are sort of saying there's something bigger, there's something more to us, and it's sort of speaking to a spiritual nature, but it doesn't have to be, which is what my interest has always been about. It's like, what if we were to see children as souls? What if we're souls? What if we're not this material being that gets trained and lives this life? Because most adults that I witnessed when I was young weren't very happy. It was sort of not a joyful place to get to. And I think as a child looking at that, it's like, where's the joy? How come we have to grow up in a way? And we get told you've got to grow up, you've got to do this. But in the growing up, we leave behind so many capacities that we shouldn't leave behind, but we're being told they're childish. So to me, it's an evolution in consciousness. So there's a bigger picture unfolding, and we're part of that wave, no doubt about it. Depending on what level you want to go in at, because I've studied this extensively, we can go in at any point. I did a lot of work and research on a man called Aurobindo, or Sri Aurobindo, who was an Indian mystic. And he was writing about the superhuman, which a lot of people are doing now. He wrote over 100 years ago, but he was writing about our evolution of consciousness is to move beyond this material belief alone and look and welcome these other aspects and potentials that we have in our bodies, that everyone has as a part of being human, that we're not activating because we're having them trained out of us or we're having them disciplined out of us. So what happens if we allow that aspect of who we are to come forward, which is our spiritual side, but it's not really, because we're spiritual beings in a human body, we're souls. So if we can see the child as a soul, we have a new framework that says, of course, souls come in to further the evolution of consciousness. They come in to further the evolution of humanity. They come in to make a change. And that's what I believe we all do. How we do that will differ. And I think there's more people collectively doing that now in the last 2010, since COVID, last 6 years, than ever, because they're like, that's not okay with me. That doesn't feel right in my body. And just because someone's telling me, or we've always done it this way, maybe we need to consider new ways. And I guess it's the growth in more people questioning what they've been told. So it's that space to say, I know I believe this all the time, and I've grown up to believe this, and I was indoctrinated to believe this. But what if it goes against the very nature of what I feel to be right for me? And then we go on this other journey where we've got to unpack what's true, what's real. Is that even possible? Did we really do that? Should we do that? So the questions arise. And I think it's in the questioning where we all grow. We're all growing in conscious evolution. Resources, more time, like our parents and grandparents didn't have the time to explore lofty ideas. In my work and research, I was really fascinated to think that all the philosophers like 2,000 years ago were all men, because a lot of women had a lot to say, and a lot of the philosophers were married to very intelligent women, but it was the men because they had the time. They didn't have usually they were funded by family or something, so they could have these big ideas and they could explore them, and they could go on their journeys or meditations or whatever they called them to explore truth and reality. And it wasn't usually the women, but I think that something significant has happened in my generation, particularly, where we did get sold a story that we are just as important and we didn't have to do things the way they were done. And it's caused a little bit of an imbalance, because I think that with that, we've missed the idea that we don't have to be anything other than what we are, but we've never had that encouraged. So if we go back to what is the essence of life, what are we here for? What's for me as a woman, and how does that differ to what the men 2,000 years ago were telling me, or the society that's been built because of those thoughts? And most of them were male dominated. And I love men. I've got 2 adult sons, and I think they're the most delightful human beings I've ever met. However, we have to continue to unpack a lot of the prejudice that we've grown up with, because there is ideas about what's potential, what's capable, what's possible for women and men, or gender, or roles, or responsibilities, like everything's sort of under the spotlight. And I think that has to lead to a crack somewhere. A system can't hold together if there's too many people saying this doesn't feel right. I don't want my child to go and have this experience. So we have to heal ourselves, because we might have had a bad school experience. And then we work on how much are we reacting to our own past, and how much is the situation my child's in not good for them. And we often need help with that. Like, we need someone who's done it before, or we need someone who's prepared to have a voice around that. So that's all part of the process. But I think, to go back to answer your question, Jodi, I think we're evolving. I think we're here with a purpose, and I think we're here at a particular time for particular reasons. That's my belief. So that's really important to say, well, we're in this evolving universe, and we now know we can create what we want. We don't have to keep going back to old ways. They didn't work. A lot of our people, a lot of things are going wrong. Yeah.
And I think one of the things that we're certainly learning a lot about is being in our heart space, not our head. And I think the way society is being structured nowadays is it's about figuring things out, working to a plan, having a framework. And yes, they're helpful to have, but ultimately it's also about reconnecting to our own intuition. And that's something we speak a lot about here at QM, is around just connecting back into that heart space and that inner knowing, and then teaching our kids to sort of do the same, really, rather than having to, use our head to work everything out. So you've worked with so many families and children. What is it that, you can help parents understand when it comes to, that the kids might look like they're coping on the outside, but really on the inside there's a lot that's just not going on? What are the sort of signs that might help parents understand what that looks like?
Yeah, I think, well, you raise a couple of really important things first, Kerri, and I just want to talk to that first, because it will lead into the next part, which is really interesting, because we have fragmented ourselves. So if we look at ourselves as a soul, we have to incorporate our bodies, minds and spirits. So that's what my map and model does. So it integrates those what have often been disparate parts of the self. So it's like, what if we're body, mind, spirit connected? Why have we disregarded the body? Why have we not taken heed to the intuition? Why have we not trusted our body's wisdom? Why have we thought the body's against us if it has a problem, a behaviour or an illness? So it's like, part of my work has been about we're actually whole. We're whole. We're all those things. Frameworks are important, but if we override one of those aspects of self to the detriment of another, we have imbalance. So it's like, if we look at ourselves as an entity and we look at our children as this wholeness, that they're coming in exactly as they should be for their own perfect growth and development in this time in evolution. What are they helping us to see when they have a tummy ache? What are they helping us to see when they are school refusal? What are they helping us to see when they're not able to use the toilet, or whatever things children do? And every family is so different, and every family has unique things, but there's common themes that happen as children grow and develop. And that's been my interest. So if our children are growing and developing whole, we'll generally see the things that become problems, the little anxieties, the stresses to safety, like not feeling that they want to do something, kick back, like a lot of resistance, a lot of PDA or pushing back against authority, a lot of grief and sadness, or even depression in children. So we can look at all of those symptoms as an expression of the child's need. So what is it? And I've developed the needs model that helps us understand that there's 7 foundational needs that are based on the chakra system. Now, when I was researching and studying and started to look at a new map for children, because I realised myself when my children went to school, I have a 33-year-old and a 30-year-old, 2 sons. And when they started school, I realised that the system wasn't really geared for them. And I guess it took me a long time to write an article that says our school is not built for children. But it comes with a lot of grounded research, but also experience. Yeah. It was like, this doesn't fit. Like, I don't understand why, and the classroom setups, things like that, they're all just sort of moving on. And I understand that when we're born into a structure or we go into a structure that we can't change everything at once, but there were some things that just didn't feel right for me. So it was about me asking my children what was happening for them in that situation. Like, I remember one experience when my youngest started school and he was very resistant to even going into the classroom, and he turned around one day and he said to me, "Mum, stop pushing me, I'm not ready." And I didn't realise the degree to which I was actually not forcing. I didn't think I was forcing him, but I was wanting him to go. I was wanting him to integrate. I was wanting him to get into that. And it was a bit of a epiphany moment, because it's like, oh, I'm pushing him and I don't want to push him. I want him to develop at his own pace. And if that doesn't feel right for him and I keep forcing him to do something that doesn't feel right for his little body, then this isn't going to go well for him or for me. And of course, that realization didn't come all there and then, but it was a striking moment where it's like, why am I forcing him? And if there's something that he doesn't like about this, why can't I listen? Why can't I take a moment? Then why can't I be the voice for him? But what I experienced, and I guess what I see a lot of other parents experience, is once we start to speak out, it can lead to a little bit of resistance. And then it's our task individually to strengthen ourselves, to find out what's appropriate, what's not appropriate for us and our family. And I think that journey then leads you down different pathways, because if we're forcing our children to do something and they're telling us it doesn't feel right, even if it's a gentle, like, I don't want to go, and we keep overriding that, we're not getting to a deeper understanding of what's happening for them. We're just projecting, I've got to go, I've got a job to get to, I've got a timeline, which we all know is true. Like, it's not about discounting that. It's not about making parents feel guilty, but it's just about pausing long enough to question, is this really what I want? Do I really want to have this feeling in my body when I leave my children and they're not ready, but I have to go somewhere else? And then we have to decide for ourselves. No one can decide that for us. We have to decide for ourselves that I don't want to live this way. I want to find a different way. And I guess that was the impetus of my work and research. Like, what do children really need? How come we're not seeing it? How come the psychologies and the education system don't actually meet the child's needs? They're just educating based on standards and set curriculum and benchmarks. So that was really the start of it for me. But listening to our children and having a space to listen to our children. So it doesn't matter what's going on for them. Take it as the most serious conversation you could ever have, but don't get too heavy in it either. So that's the dynamic for parents. It's like, what if we were to see our children as souls? They already carry and hold all the wisdom they need for their perfect self-development. So if they're kicking back to us or a system, we want to listen. It doesn't mean we can solve it, and it doesn't mean we fix it, because we can't fix it if we're coming from that energy, but we can get curious. What is it about that situation that made you feel pushed? Yeah. Then they'll tell you, in their words, and you mightn't like it because you might hear something like, it feels like you just want to get rid of me, or it feels like you're hurrying to get to work, or it feels like when I get to that room that you don't care for me anymore, whatever it is. Yeah. So whatever they tell you, you really want to listen without making it personal. Now here's the rub. We all grew in bodies and we were all parented in ways that we perhaps didn't get our needs met. So we vowed to do better. Like, I'm going to be better. I'm going to do this in an improved way. And then when our children tell us we're not doing a very good job, because they might say, I don't like that, or I don't want to do that, or that doesn't feel good to me, we sort of get offended. So if we could just drop out getting our defense and stop getting offended, but in order to do that, we have to do our own inner work, which is what you started the conversation with, Kerri. You know, we've got to realize that I can only meet my child from the degree that I have my needs met. So if I was a child who was forced, or I was a child who was pushed, or I was a child who was disregarded, then I'm going to respond to my child in equal or opposite energy. So sometimes, as I said earlier, we might say, oh, that's not as bad as what it was for me. You should have seen my schooling. It was horrendous. Get the strap. And you don't even get the strap anymore. Yeah. Like, if you went to school and I went to school, you'd have something to complain about. But it's really interesting because that's one way. It's like viewing our child from an improved version of what we needed, or we try and overcompensate to be the parent that we wish we had, but we're still not being authentic to ourselves, and our children can read it, like, they know. So we just want to get clear in ourselves what is happening in my body when my child brings something to me, a problem, an issue, a behaviour, and then we start there. But it's hard without a map, which is why I love the foundational needs modelling, because it speaks to the 7 needs we all have and the ways that they present. So the needs are energy centres, they're the chakras, and getting a needs model, researching a needs model and having it as part of my PhD research 15 years ago was no easy feat, because it was still seen as a little bit woo, as like, we can't talk about chakras. And it's like, oh, but if we're energetic beings and biology says this and quantum physics says this, and we now know with epigenetics this, why can't we start introducing an energetic model? So that's been a big push for me, and that's the name of my book, A Push for a Child Philosophy. But it's really beautiful because we have to start to think outside those structures before we can create new ways of being. But it mostly starts with us individually and the map that we were given that represents us, which have all been flawed and deficient. Human beings have been seen to be deficient and needing something more than what they already have, rather than saying, even with all these issues and troubles, what if it's exactly perfect for you? What do we need to take from that so that you can grow and expand? Yeah.
Wow. Your wisdom is incredible, Maxine. I just feel like, you know, that balance between trust, like that real element of just trusting that they've come in whole, that they are perfect, that they have their journey as we all do, and that regardless of which way it goes, they are going to grow and expand human consciousness exactly as we need it to be today. It's an incredible concept that I think many of us don't stop to really consider.
I think there's also people, like particularly parents who are maybe new to this information. The concept of being whole suggests that it's like problem-free, but that's actually not the point, because the point, obviously, as you're talking about, is that we are souls here for the evolutionary experience. Now, evolution means there must be some contrast, is what I would call it, right? So some shades in there so you can actually, extract the wisdom and be that evolutionary being within this skin sack, shall we call it. And I think sometimes parents get confused and they say, well, how can my child be whole because they're, doing this and doing that and they've got an attitude and they swear and, that's my child, clearly. But the point is, it's the wholeness comes from being that, having the innate wisdom within them and having their own answers. And I just absolutely adore what you said. In fact, it's happened organically in our household. And something really fun that happened this morning, which there's no way I could have predicted this, but two of my kids who are 14 and 15 request to go to the beach just to basically get their feet wet in the mornings. And I'm like, okay, cool, let's do that. And something that came out of my 15-year-old's mouth today was, oh, it's a bit strange, but I've got a theory on death. And I'm like, okay, sure, let's talk about death at 7:30 in the morning. And she said, oh, what I reckon is death's just a few steps ahead of you, and occasionally you catch up to it and you'll have a bit of a brush with it, and then it'll, go back in front of you a few steps ahead, but it's always with you, and at some point you step into it and then you die. And I'm like, I actually quite like that. I think that's quite a neat explanation. But if I had have put anything else into the conversation other than just letting her say what she wanted to say, and she was already had a bit of judgment about herself, but that frequency of always looking at the kids going, you have your own answers, just give me a little bit of a spotlight into that. There's a richness in there, and that's what I want parents to sort of fall into, that trust of going, you might actually have these conversations where you're like, holy smokes, this kid's got some interesting ideas. I wouldn't have had that conversation if we hadn't have exited the mainstream system, just it wouldn't have been provided. And we've been rebuilding her confidence for many years around the fact that she's not dumb. So, she learns differently, but she's not dumb, but she wouldn't have even shared that. She was a very different kid. And so
it's beautiful.
The way you can phrase that is so beautiful.
Yeah, but I think too, like what you speak to, Jodi, is that I feel as a soul, and this is what I've done a lot of delving into because it was sort of a bit kooky, can you imagine me trying to explain this 15 years ago to academia? So it's like I had to look at the philosophies, and Plato tells us that he uses an allegory of a chariot and says that as human beings we've got different parts, and he uses the white horse and the black horse and the chariot as a way of speaking to body, mind, spirit. And I really love Plato, and I really got immersed in that. But I drew a further idea that in our whole selves, I sort of attributed the black horse, the white horse, and the chariot to the body, mind, spirit. So the black horse is the unruly, emotional body that we think is a bit crazy and hasn't been able to be controlled, and the behaviours, or the ways the body presents. And the mind was the white horse that knew, where to go. It's almost like this black and white, really base understanding. But Plato's is a little bit like that. And I've got writings, it's in my book. I talk a lot about Plato's allegory of the chariot. But the driver of the chariot itself, the charioteer, is the spirit. So it's like the spirit has a hard time keeping the feelings and thoughts connected. And if we can keep both horses together, was Plato's idea, then we would further and evolve. We would reach enlightenment. We would move beyond the body-mind duality, and the spirit would be guided where it needs to go. And I really like that because it was like, oh yeah, if we feel and think differently, like if I think something, but my feelings at odds, how can I ever be whole? How can I ever be whole? So my work really, in a nutshell, is about making sure we have integrity between what I think and what I feel. And unfortunately, a lot of our biggest systems don't even know how to encourage that because they're working against that. I don't care what you feel, just do it. I don't care what you think. You've got to show me where you had that thinking come from. Or if a child shares a beautiful aspect of something that they've become aware of, a knowing, like you talked about Jodi's daughter, often it's sort of poo-hooed or I haven't got time for this. Oh, yeah, that's great. That's a great theory. Instead of going, oh, my gosh, this is vital information about that child's soul and her own self-understanding that wasn't possible because she was not encouraged to feel and think together. So how can we ever be whole if we're thinking that we shouldn't be doing something because it's wrong or we can't do something because it's not possible, but we've got this drive in us to keep moving and pushing, and aren't we wonderful? Aren't we all great? Aren't we here for a bigger purpose? And if we keep getting messages that we're not and you're not good enough and you haven't done that the way I want, we're always going to be fragmented. Yeah. So wholeness is just being whole without fragmenting the different aspects, you know, of me, welcoming all of me, welcoming all of our children, even if someone says, oh, they need to develop in that area, you know, we might say, okay, yeah, that's good, but we're working on this or this other aspect's going underground if we force that too much. But it is a step-by-step process and it's going to be independent to your children. But wholeness is body, mind, spirit in harmony, no fragmentation between feelings and thoughts. And that's a lifetime process. Because how many times do we say no to our yeses and yes to our no's?
Oh, yeah. Very much so.
A lot. And that's obviously because of, you know, what's happening around us is that we're encouraged to not pay attention to those signals.
We've been entrained out of it.
Yeah, we have. We've been, and generationally we haven't been, it's been, you know, get over it, or you don't be talking about, or are you just, you're too much for me, or, you know, whatever. So we disregard it, goes underground, and then often, you know, our children are the ones that bring it out. So anyone that's in a role with children, whether it's parenting or a lot of teachers that don't have children, experience the same thing because epigenetically they're going back to their own childhood as they care for children. So that's another big part of my research, is that there's this function happening in all of us as human beings. It's part of our evolutionary process, but it's part of that process that when we're in the company of a 5-year-old, we regress to being 5. It doesn't, it's not consciously right in front of us, but we almost parent our child from what we needed at 5. Now, if there was trauma or drama or a particular patterning, or say we didn't like school, say we hated school, and then our children start school, we've already projected our 5-year-old experience of school onto them epigenetically, unconsciously, implicitly, and we wonder why they're resisting without exploring that there could be something I've got against this thing or whatever. So always coming back to ourselves. But yes, we're whole. We're all whole, exactly as we are.
Quanta folks, sorry to pause the conversation there, but this podcast is a 2-part of this Alchemising Education with Dr. Maxine, because it's so good, isn't it?
It's worth it. It's we really wanted to take the extra time to really get to the heart of it, literally to the heart of it.
So think of this end of this podcast episode as your opportunity to go get a fresh cup of tea or have a quick wee break, put on a load of washing.
Down again.
That's right.
Check another movie.
That's right. Do that, and we will see you for part 2 of this excellent conversation with Dr. Maxine Therese. Hey Quanta folks, I've said it before and I'll say it again. Birth is transformational. And it can be transformational in the right way and in the not so right way. So how do we arm ourselves to be really prepared for this incredible experience? Well, you wouldn't go out and run a marathon without any kind of training. You'd at least do occasional stretches, and the High Vibe Birth course, which is self-paced, available at the QuantiMama.com website, is available for you. You get to luxuriate in all of the ideas and transformational techniques and the beautiful information that can only have a positive effect on your birth. So get fit for your birth marathon and head to QuantiMama for the High Vibe Birth course. QuantiFolks. You know, at QuantiMama, we have a mandate that we feel so passionate about. We want and we are raising the community's vibration and frequency and consciousness through parenting and birth experiences. Such incredible, transformational experiences that will shape you as a person and are the very fabric of life. Do you want to find out how to high vibe your experience even more? Then QuantiMama is your place. Head there for the High Vibe Birth course, ultimate preparation for birthing. Head there if you want to re-engage your child in the love of learning for the Take the Leap course, which is a deschooling course for parents. There's beautiful mind movies, and obviously this podcast is there, and we are here to support you. So head there for all the juice.